Hey guys, hey guys, I'm Slow Junior here, aka Mustached Tom, and welcome back to the monthly horror reviews. And a quick apology if I do sound slightly different. I have gotten a little sick, so again, a few apologies here. Um, and the second apology, I apologize if these reviews haven't gotten out there. I was hoping that doing the horror reviews would get a little bit more attention, but of course YouTube actually probably doesn't really care. I don't know if the algorithm takes into account of what holiday it is or whatever. I tried to do the whole horror movie month review and I figured I might as well finish it, so here we go. With that being said, let's talk about the movie Fractured. So, we just got done not too long ago talking about Joker, and I thought I'd bring that up because this movie has a very similar, not trustworthy narrator type of movie here, as we follow a young man named Ray, who is arguing with his wife Jo, and his daughter is in the back, Perry, sorry. While they're driving to get to his new job, I assume that's what they're traveling for. Nonetheless, they go to take a pit stop so she can use Perry, the little daughter, can use the restroom. So the mom is talking. She goes in the store and goes in the store to help out with Perry and her using the restroom. So they do that, and meanwhile, Ray is looking for his daughter's, I guess it's a Walkman or some sort of old-timey music player of sorts. Nonetheless, when the daughter returns, she claims that the music player has gone. So the dad is searching the vehicle, near it, and the mother went back inside to check. Meanwhile, the daughter gets distracted by this balloon and starts to head over to it. So, she sees that there is a dead deer in the perimeter, and she kind of gets a little freaked out, but then she sees this dog that slowly but surely makes its way towards her, and this causes her to make her get a little too scared and unable to call out, so she starts backing up towards this ledge. So eventually she's able to call out, and the father sees that the dog has cornered her on this ledge. So Ray, in his desperate attempt, tries to throw a rock to scare off the dog, and does so, but in the process the daughter also gets jumped and falls over. The dad, Ray, decides to try to dive in after her, and we see him hit the ground, at the very least the way it's shot, and then we know that she is fallen to some extent. We see her fall, and then we see him sort of grab her to an extent and then fall together. It's implied pretty early on that she was lost to this fall, and that the mother was as well. When the mother came, he just lost his mind and then took her out accidentally or by purpose or whatever mixture of whatever you want to say it is. Nonetheless, he wakes up from his little daze, and when he does, Perry wakes up, and I'm going to put that in quotes now, wakes up. Obviously, this is where the false narrative starts to take into effect. Early spoilers, so there you go. And this one is a little bit interesting in terms of how it decides to handle the situation, because it makes it seem like you're supposed to buy into this sort of his fantasy, I suppose, the one he's trying to create here, a little bit stronger, I feel, than, say, the Joker, by comparison. Um, so we have him going to the hospital, and excuse me, he's like speeding up to get there, and he gets there, and it's super busy. So he finally signs in, and he's told to wait a little bit longer. So they're like getting a little tired of waiting, obviously. Um, they talk to each other a little bit, and Ray's sort of looking around and seeing some imagery of like these corpses being brought in, and you can see that very distinct look of like something odd is going on in this hospital. And that'll be a constant theme throughout the movie through his lens, is that something is wrong with this hospital. And eventually he is called in, and he's asked all these questions about insurance and his policy, about the blood types and donating particularly comes up, and that is when the oddity comes back in, the sort of distinct of like, oh, everything, it's, don't worry about it, you know, sort of that sort of ordeal, or just like moving things along. So we see that they get brought into the doctor, Dr. Bert Ham or something like that, and he's like talking about the situation. He mentions this dog that was there in the scenario to the wife who didn't know the full situation. So the doctor suggests that she has a bad head injury, and that they need to do a scan just to make sure that everything is on the okay. So he wants to take her down, and Ray asks the wife Jo to go with her, and so the two of them go with this other doctor to head into that area. So he dreams about what he just said, or like he's dreaming, and you see him say what he just said earlier, so a very clear sign that we're back to the reality portion of the movie, or at least temporarily we are. So he wakes up and he's like, okay, this is a bit weird. So he goes to the restroom, washes up. Yeah. And he goes to the hospital attendant, the one at the front, and he says, like, he's trying to figure out, like, about where Pepper is, or, like, if they're done officially, and she says, there's no record of them signing in. You signed in, and he did. We saw him sign in. By the way, I should mention that he signed in. So he's getting a little bit, obviously, worked up, and he's starting to yell at them. And he says, again, and she's trying to make sure, so he's like, no, we don't have any information on this Perry. So Ray gets nervous, and he starts to make a call. And he makes his way outside, and he starts to see things and panics. So he heads back, and this is when security is called, because he makes his way into an area he's not supposed to be in. So he stopped by this cop that's like a part of the, part of this, according to him later on anyways, and this other doctor. So we see one of the doctors that treated the daughter earlier, Anne, called over. And she also mentions how he was the one who went in for the head injury and no one else. He went in alone, and this is obviously causing him to freak out. And he is sprayed and injected with a little, like, one of those needles to, like, knock people out, I suppose, for at least temporarily. So he's locked in this room, and he decides to tear this room asunder, looking for something to help him out. He finds like these three general adrenaline type needle things, and he injects like two proper into himself while failing on the first one. So he's like freaking out. Grabs like some cloth and breaks the glass, and makes his way out. Quickly is chased, obviously, because he's causing a commotion at this point. And he's seeing the guy who had the daughter last, and he's trying to get his attention. So he heads back outside when he sees he can't, because he's still being chased, so he manages to get back to his car, and, he starts freaking out. He's, like, crying and stuff like that. And he makes his way back to, like, the road area, and he sees these two cops, and this is where the movie gets a little bit more interesting, I would say, is that he's, like, telling the police about, like, oh, they have my daughter, and then they did all this stuff, like, oh, they captured her, or whatever, and the cops actually kind of go, okay, we'll check in with you, we'll see what's up. So they follow him back in, so now he has the backup of these two cops that are on his side for the moment. They're brought back to the doctors, and all people who were there before sort of interlock in this one location. So we hear Durham, one of Durham's lies, quote unquote, about like where they are, where they went. So the police officer that was with them says to check the tape. So they have all these cameras, and this actually again goes into the favor of we're sort of following. Okay, then there might actually be something wrong with this hospital, because we get these glitches on the VR footage, and the cops are going like, okay, this is actually getting a little bit weird. So, with that in mind, I do think that the ending is a little bit off, but we'll get to that in a moment. So he thinks of the station that he passed on his way here, and he's like, he mentions that, and he picks up the scarf, his daughter's scarf, and that's probably where this gets the most weird, is that he actually picks it up. Seems to be a real item, that he's able to find in the hospital. He's able to give it to the cops. They're looking at it, and he's saying, this belonged to my daughter. So that one is, again, it just seems like it seems to lean a lot closer to the hospital actually being the bad in this, but again, the turn it takes and the evidence that is starting to pile up, again, I do think that they lost track of which way they wanted this movie to go. So anyways, he thinks of, as I mentioned, he had mentioned the station, so he's like freaking out, obviously, again, when he have found the scarf, and he's told to calm down, and this is where the police are starting to get a little bit wary of him as well. And this random shriek lady is like contacted at this point. And she comes in and talks about his ex, and she keeps bringing this up. And she wants to bring him to the location of where this original incident happened. But Ray is still convinced that the hospital has taken them. And more cops arrive on the scene of where things happened. But Ray and the shrink have to have a little moment alone, and she's still trying to convince about the dog, what happened, and the shrink, I guess, somehow knows that he killed the daughter, or, well, not killed the daughter, but, like, let her go, as well as the ex, and that was more of a actual kill. So he gets arrested, and again, I do feel like this weird twist, or swerve, I suppose I'll call it, is a little bit out of left field. So, unfortunately, this causes Ray to go over the edge completely. He grabs a gun, he grabs the shrink, he locks them all in this location, and he drives back to the hospital himself, seeing this imagery and stuff. And he's thinking back to the car crash that he had with the ex and aforementioned daughter, Perry. I do apologize for the bad bit here in my review. So, I believe where I left off, I was talking about him going back to the hospital after locking up all those people. He killed a cop, which is, very bad, obviously. So he's heading down to where he thinks his wife and daughter are hidden. He finds a similar toy that was given to Pepper, so he's getting really suspicious. And he recalls the donor work because that's the area he's in, where the doctors are doing all this donor work. And he charges into this room where he thinks he sees Joey and Pepper, grabs the two of them, takes a few shots because things get a little bit hectic, and he blows a fume. And the doctors are scrambling after the fact, and he's able to get up and grab them. Doctor's obviously trying to stop him, but he does manage to get all the way back to his van and drive off just as the cops are arriving, so they just miss him. And as we see, as he looks in the reflection in his mirror, we see him looking at these other two bodies that do not reflect his daughter and wife. They're two other random bodies that he picked up and then carried along. And we see this back shot of the wife and Pepper in the back as corpses, and that was Fractured. So, as I said, I feel like this movie kind of tries to pin it in one whole direction for a longer period of time, that being, oh, there is something wrong with this hospital, right? And I feel like some of the clues even start to indicate that, the biggest one being the little scarf that he finds of his daughter. I find that one the most bizarre, because it's a in-universe item. He's able to hand it off to somebody else, and they are able to touch it. They're able to use it later with the dog and sniff out the location. Again, that just seems like the most bizarre part of this movie. It does seem like they were trying to so heavily imply that it was one thing, and then these little hints that it's leaning one way, but then it ends up leaning the other way, and that's probably my biggest issue with this movie. Everything else is fine, it's just that the hinting is so far is actually on his side, again, as I mentioned, and it still ends up not being on his side, so that's my biggest complaint. I'd still give it a 6 out of 10. It was still enjoyable. Again, I would just find a way to make sure that when all the hallucination stuff, breaks down, that all of it just makes sense. Because that's very important to a movie like this. So yeah, 6 out of 10, still pretty enjoyable. And if you did enjoy this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated, and until next time everyone, bye bye.